I get where so many people on the nonprofit side are afraid to speak truth to power. I get how so many of them have been punished for trying to do that in the past. There's a real price to be paid sometimes. And I get that there's a power imbalance that really prevents us from being honest in the ways that would hopefully help push us forward. But at the same time, somebody has to say it. Somebody has to stand up for us. Somebody has to say, this is a ginormous waste of time and money. Somebody has to say, a lot of these practices are not only steeped in patriarchy, but in white supremacy, and it is not working for us. Someone has to say, you're actually wasting your money and time and our money and time. So if you really care about these issues, you'll find a more efficient way to make these investments. Somebody has to say the emperor is wearing no clothes. Somebody has to say it. And, I truly believe that when you tell the truth in life, ultimately things will work out in your favor.
Hi, friends. Ever wondered how you could turn your big ideas into results? Together, let's reimagine a better sector, tackle systemic issues, and yes, raise some serious cash. Welcome back to The Small Nonprofit, the podcast where your passion meets action. Hello, everyone. Today we're talking about something that's really interesting, how to critique the system while you're within it, especially as an executive director, because that can be quite difficult. If you're new here, my name is Maria. I'm the host of the Small Nonprofit Podcast, and I'm an expert fundraiser with over 10 years of experience that's on a mission to help EDs get more funding without the stress. And today I'm joined by Amber, who is just amazing and doing really, really incredible work, but I'll let Amber speak to that herself. Hi, Amber.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Thanks for being here. I would love if you could quickly introduce yourself to our audience, many of them who will be familiar with your work, but maybe not know who you are just yet.
Possibly. So happy to introduce myself. I'm Amber Hamilton. I am just a girl from Jersey, as I like to say. I'm originally from New Jersey, but I've been working in the Memphis area for about the last 7 or 8 years full time, but doing work in the city for about 10 years now. I'm the president and CEO of the Memphis Music Initiative. Our goal is to really make sure that young people across Memphis, particularly Black and Brown young people, have access to high quality, accessible music engagement all across the city, no matter what zip code they are in. Memphis is a music city, so we really want to make sure that those traditions remain alive for our young people and that our young people are invested in to continue their journey as creatives and as artists. So that is the work that we do, but interestingly, we do it in different ways. We do it through direct services. So we have young people who are doing programming with us right now, as a matter of fact. Shout out to our MMI Works young people. And we also are essentially in philanthropy. So we do grant making and capacity building for other organizations that have similar missions within Memphis so that there is an ecosystem of healthy organizations that are sustainable, that have high quality programming, because we can't accomplish this mission alone. There's no way, no matter how big we got, no matter how, expansive, that we would be able to serve all young people in Memphis. So we fund, we support, we bring together all of those other organizations, not as our competitors, but as our colleagues in the work, and support them in continuing to grow and grow their missions. So that's what we do. People may recognize my name from a video or a couple videos that we had go out that went kind of semi-viral in the nonprofit world. One is I Hope Like Hell We Get This Grant, which was a kind of music compilation of common refrains from nonprofits about, trying to fundraise and get money for what we do. And then we had some other ones out there as well. So we try to infuse some of the creativity that we are trying to infuse with our young people into our own work, into our own approaches in this crazy nonprofit philanthropic landscape. So I wrote those videos and wrote the songs for them and all of those things. So sometimes my name will ring a bell before my actual face does with people.
That is actually how I bumped into you, and you became part of my orbit because I saw your YouTube channel and I was like, wow, they're doing really amazing stuff for a nonprofit because they're publicly criticizing the sector while being part of it, which is something that a lot of executive directors feel very scared to do. They don't want to criticize the sector in case there's any kind of repercussions when
Yeah.
it comes to biting the hand that feeds you. I want to hear how these videos came to be. And then have you seen any repercussions or what has that been like?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. So we, sometimes say the things that a lot of our nonprofit brethren and sistren want to say, but don't feel comfortable saying. Let me say, I get it. Like, I get what you're trying to do to keep the lights on. So there's no judgment from over here about whether you actually said it or didn't say it. But, we have a fantastic team at MMI, and we talk very openly within the office about issues of Blackness, issues of white supremacy, issues of unfairness and injustice in funding. All the issues. We talk about them very openly and honestly in our four walls. So we actually had a campaign called Call and Response where we were, making some bigger investments into pay for executive directors that were our grantee partners, legacy kind of capital projects that they were working on, and then rest, right? To be able to have some time for them to rest and retreat. So we were making those investments. We wanted others to think about as on the philanthropic side, how could they be more responsive to the actual needs of their grantees? So as we were having that conversation, we had talked about doing a video, as lots of us do to kind of talk about the project. But I had this moment where I said, what if it was like us? What if the video was like us? And somebody said, "What do you mean like us?" I said, "What if it was funny like us? Like, if it was like what it is to sit inside our office and like listen to the things we say?" And everybody was kind of like, I don't know. And I said, "Okay, I'll tell you what, let me write something and then let you respond to it," because people didn't know where I was going with this. So that night, I went home and I wrote the first video out, and it took me like no time at all because all this stuff was like right at my all these experiences I had had were right at my fingertips. And I will say everything you see and hear in those videos is born out of real experience, either mine or somebody else I knows. So it took me like no time to write the first one, and I showed it to them, and they kind of got the concept. And we should have been, but we weren't too worried about repercussions. A, because we felt like we were telling the truth. And there's an expression in the South, when you tell the truth, you shame the devil. And, we were like, I'm not lying. If anybody wanted to refute anything we said, I'd welcome the conversation, but we were telling the truth. And B, it's important that we find ways to not just kind of say the same things over and over again about our frustrations, but kind of find different entry points into that conversation. I mean, we all have seen the data. If data were logic, we would have changed minds a long time ago. We see consistently that BIPOC leaders, get less money in terms of investments in their organizations than white-led organizations. We see consistently that, this application process takes so much time, and we have not seen any data that suggests the more time you spend on it, the more effective, the investment is in those programs. We see all the time and we hear from, other nonprofits and other leaders that philanthropy just is not meeting their true needs. It's not getting us closer to why any of us do this work in the first place. So why can't we talk about that? And further, the way we have constructed how we do philanthropy inside of MMI is very different. So we're not only doing it differently because we don't want to do things the old way, we're doing it to prove that it can be done differently. We don't have a written application process. We don't have a written reporting process. We don't have a lot of the same gatekeeping that organizations say is part of accountability and evaluation. Yet we're able to not only distribute money to these organizations, but have a real insight into how the money is being spent, what the health of those organizations look like, all of those things without kind of replicating a lot of the nonsense that we see in kind of traditional philanthropic organizations. So we're kind of living proof that it can be done very differently. We pass every audit. We've never had an audit fine. We've never gotten in trouble. The philanthropy police have never come in and gotten us. So it absolutely can be done. And we just challenge philanthropy to kind of do better. But we wanted to do it in a way that looked and felt like us, like how we talk about it, how we think about it. So, with the videos, it was an opportunity to poke some fun as we do, but it was an opportunity to showcase some really amazing, actors and singers in Memphis, which we always try to do. One of our grantee partners, Princeton James Productions, actually shot it for us and recruited the actors. So we wanted to showcase their talents. By the way, we paid them separately. We did not just say, do this for us because we're a funder. We paid the market rate for their work, which is important. So it was an opportunity to do all those things in kind of one creative push, to make a point, to showcase some of the talent in Memphis, but also to hopefully spark a conversation and challenge people to think about this work very differently. I get where so many people on the nonprofit side are afraid to speak truth to power. I get how so many of them have been punished for trying to do that in the past. There's a real price to be paid sometimes. And I get that there's a power imbalance that really prevents us from being honest in the ways that would hopefully help push us forward. But at the same time, somebody has to say it. Somebody has to stand up for us. Somebody has to say, this is a ginormous waste of time and money. Somebody has to say, a lot of these practices are not only steeped in patriarchy, but in white supremacy, and it is not working for us. Someone has to say, you're actually wasting your money and time and our money and time. So if you really care about these issues, you'll find a more efficient way to make these investments. Somebody has to say the emperor is wearing no clothes. Somebody has to say it. And, I truly believe that when you tell the truth in life, ultimately things will work out in your favor. There might be short-term consequences, there might be a slap on the hand, but that's okay. I'm built for that. As I mentioned, I'm from Jersey. It's all good to me. There's no slap on the hand that you're gonna give me that's really gonna, make me close my mouth or run away. So, I said, I think this is a role for us as truth tellers. Because the interesting thing, being on both the philanthropic side and on the nonprofit side is you see both of it. And as we talk to our grantee partners and they express their frustrations and are able to be honest with us, we hear a lot of these same refrains. So it's not just us. We're not crazy. And I want to tell you, you're not crazy. Whoever you are, listening, you're not crazy. This is crazy. So when we first came out, doing the videos, the first people to respond were our grantee partners. And they were like, "Oh my God, A, I can't believe you said it. But B, thank God you said it because somebody needed to say it. And this is what we experience every day." So, we were speaking the frustrations of our kind of most beloved partners and our friends and our, people who we really want to support who have been through so much to try to lift up this work. Somebody has to speak on their behalf. And we found that that was one way that we could be helpful. Like that's a role we can actually play to challenge people. We get to sit at certain philanthropic tables, which is great because then get to influence that conversation. But we're not there at those tables just to kind of, be there. We're there to advocate for organizations like our partners. We're there to say what they can't say because they're not in the room, but we know that they believe. We're there to show the results of our work philanthropically, to say this can all be done very differently. It's possible, and you could do it too if you were so inclined to do so. So we have a real advocacy point of view inside of the work, and we take and accept the charge of being able to speak on behalf of those people who can't get in the room. As Black people, we understand what it is to have decisions that affect you deeply be made inside of rooms that you can't get into, and that you are not part of the power structure. You're not part of the decision making, but you're deeply affected by the outcomes. So once we do get in the room, once we do have a platform, once we do have the ability to say something, we're going to take that moment and say it. And that's important to us in terms of our organizational ethos.
I think that's something that a lot of Black women, like, will say, like, "We are the ones that always have to speak out and always take the risk, and then, like, you still don't come along with us."
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that point because that's a particularly challenging dynamic inside of this. There are lots of nuances and pieces about what it is to try to shift a sector like philanthropy. But one of them absolutely is racial and genderized in terms of, you know, it's certainly there's a million studies out there that kind of demonstrate that when Black people kind of stand up, whether it's for diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether it's for other co-workers or whatever, we pay a disproportionate price, and it is not without consequence when we do that. But at the same time, it needs to be done and it needs to be said, and we can't always wait for other people or rely on other people to speak those truths even when they're really obvious. I would love to be able to just kind of sit back and do some basic fundraising and continue our work and, do all of those things, but that's not the way it works. That old adage that you have to work twice as hard to get half as far is absolutely true. Maybe worse than that. I mean, when I think about how excellent our programs have to be, when I think about, the level of depth to which we have to go to establish credibility for the work that we do, that other people literally will go and have a lunch with somebody and come away with a $500,000 commitment. That has never happened to me. I ain't been to a lunch yet where I came away with any level of commitment from anybody. It takes so much more. So there's an absolute additional burden on us, and there's an absolute additional risk to us for speaking these truths. There are absolutely people in Memphis that don't mess with us, don't mess with me personally, because they see themselves in some of the things that I say and, don't really love that truth. There are people who basically say, listen, keep your head down and don't talk about this stuff, and you would be more successful. You'll make more money, you'll do better fundraising. And it's hard always being the ones that has to stick your neck out on behalf of other people and be in that position. But, I think there's some elements that help us in that regard. One is that we're the rare Black organization that was pretty well capitalized on the front end. So we had, some real leeway to do things and to be disruptors, as soon as we came into the space. Two, I think once we really started to analyze the situations and what we were seeing on the ground in Memphis in terms of the way that other small Black and brown led, creative youth development organizations have been capitalized, it was so obvious. It was like, how can we possibly ignore this? How can we not talk about this? It was the discrepancies were just horrific. So there's no way we can do our job and not talk about the impact of these very much racialized discrepancies and funding and what that has looked like in community, right? So there was the elephant in the room in terms of our work that we felt like we needed to deal with. But third, I think, from a personal perspective, I'm a very motivated person when it comes to change. I attended Howard University, which in my view is one of the finest institutions in this country in terms of helping young Black professionals bloom with a very strong sense of self, with a very strong sense of history, and with a very strong sense of where they fall in a long line of change makers across the African diaspora, right? So I come from that history. I come from a very strong family. I come from a very strong family of women. I am a change maker and disruptor by nature. And the person who started MMI, my good friend and colleague Darren Isom, comes from a very similar tradition. He's also a Howard University grad. He's also from a tremendous family in New Orleans with a very interesting history. So we have come from a place where we have a tremendous sense of self, or we have a tremendous sense of responsibility in terms of the privileges we've been given and how that manifests in our desire to move things even further along. So there's no there's nothing that can scare me in philanthropy. What are they gonna do to me? It's like, what are you gonna do? I'll be fine. There's nothing that will really stop me from saying what needs to be said. And it's not because I'm so tough and not because, but because I feel like I was born to do this. I was born to say these things. I come from a tradition of people and women who have said these things and have taken on that mantle very seriously. So, you think I'm worried about somebody, saying something unkind to me in a meeting? I don't care. You think I'm, upset because certain, gatekeepers in Memphis don't particularly care for me? I don't care. I have friends. I'm good. So what I'm there to do is fight on behalf of our young people who don't have all the resources that they deserve, and fight on behalf of our organizations who are trying to do outstanding work in community, but are doing it with, spit and glue instead of, the real resources that they need to do it and do it with the level of fidelity that they want to. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here to represent. So that's what kind of keeps us motivated to go ahead and say the things that need to be said. That's the tradition we come from. Those are the people we represent. And that's who's first and foremost when I sit in a room. I'm not there in that room to keep my position in that room no matter what. I'm not there for longevity. I'm not there to protect my job. I'm not there to, meet new people so I can become a part of their country club or their whatever. I don't care about any of that. Honestly, I'm just not that interested. What I'm there to do is put on for my people. So when I'm in that room, that's what I'm going to do. And if you don't like it, so be it. But I'm also there to hold people accountable. I think one of the things I'm most proud about in terms of MMI is not only what we've been able to do as an organization, but the impact that we've been had, the ripple effect that we've been able to have on other funders, both locally and even outside of Memphis, in terms of taking what some might call a more trust-based approach, but call it what you will, creating relationships with organizations they never would have funded in the past, being kind of confronted by an organization that is willing to call you on your stuff, to talk about the racial disparities within your funding and your grant making, and hold you to the fire and ask you why that is, and then ask you what are you going to do about it, and then come back to you in a year and say, why haven't these numbers moved? That's the level of accountability we need. So, somebody has got to invest in that work, and MMI was willing to do it.
I do appreciate that you shared a little bit about like we were well resourced because it helps the listener understand like maybe there was a lesser risk, but there's still a lot of other risks that you're taking, right? So it's not if the money part is lesser, then there's other risks that you're facing, right? But something that I find really interesting about what you do, and I would love to hear a little bit more about, is using humor as a tool
Yeah.
to resist. Because I'm seeing that in Vu's work, I'm seeing that in the way that people are responding to fascism in the States. And specifically in the South, like I'd love to hear about like why humor specifically.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, this is all very serious work, right? We love to use humor, but there are real people on the other end of our work, right? There are real young people who are going to college or not going to college. They're, across the nonprofit sector, there are real like clients that we work with who have real, consequences when we're there to be able to provide services and we're not. I never lose sight of that. That's incredibly important to me. And I'm funny. So humor is just one of the arrows in my quiver personally that I use a lot to kind of disarm people or just to essentially create an era of unity because we're all just people. We're all just trying to get through the day. We're all just trying to do the best we can. And there is a commonality and a humanity that's established through humor that I've always find, welcome, even in the most serious of circumstances. So I think humor as a tool for opening the doors, but also very much where you have this tense standoff around kind of racialized disparities and this world where we're in, that people have to think of those things in a way they didn't even 10 or 15 years ago, that they could kind of get away with whatever and nobody was really asking them about these questions. And then when they did have to confront that, it created a lot of tension, a lot of defensiveness, a lot of, well, you don't understand, a lot of those things. And there have been so many studies, so much data, so many think pieces, so many posts, so many, all of those things. Like, I felt like the world didn't need one more. Like, we got it. That box has been checked. But I think that when you use humor, it just kind of lessens the tension and allows you to kind of slide in, quite frankly, even more cutting observations if you do it right, when you just kind of get people relaxed and laughing. So that's always been kind of a tool that I use, particularly, I'm a 5'10" Black woman of a certain size. So when I walk in places, there is a certain amount of intimidation or fear factor or whatever it is that comes with me that I didn't bring. I didn't pack any of those things when I walked in, but it comes with the territory, right? But I know who I am and I know how to navigate through the world. And one of the things that I use to kind of help people see my humanity and put people at ease is humor. And then I hit him with the 1-2 punch, after that. But we gotta, all relax for a minute. We all gotta have a moment so that we can create some level of, commonality. And it's crazy because what I hoped wouldn't happen was that all the nonprofit people would get it and all the philanthropic people would feel offended. But what I found was that didn't happen at all. The nonprofit people got it, the philanthropic people got it, and were laughing harder than anybody because they saw themselves in it. They saw like, "Ooh, wow, that one kinda hurt, but you're right, you're right." And it allowed them to approach the subject and interrogate their own practices and behaviors, but in a way that where they didn't feel as blatantly attacked, but they felt like their defenses were down a little bit, like they were all kind of having a moment of shared unity, and then said, "Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. We do kind of do that." So, people have come up to me and said, "Oh, we used this to start off our board conversation because we knew it was going to be a tough one and we knew we needed to kind of crack the egg. We, use this to start a conversation within our staff. So that's exactly what I wanted to be used as a opportunity to kind of like lower the tension. Let's all, have a moment where we can just laugh together and laugh at the fact that we're all trying to do better, but we're still in the middle of this absurd system. But we want to do better. And we're trying to figure it out. And we're trying to convince the decision makers. And we're trying to, shift a ship that's been, going in this direction for a very long time. So, again, if one more, data sheet was going to do it, I would do one more data sheet. But I think we need different kind of points of entry into that conversation in order to make it effective.
I love all of that. I wanted to share one quote. I don't know if you've heard it already, but the truth is like a lion, laid it out and it'll defend itself.
Mhm.
I was just like when you were talking about truth and standing in your power and like standing up for what you think is right, even if it's not the easiest thing, like that to me is like the truth is so fierce that like it's unstoppable. Whatever I do can never compare. It's just like the truth is the truth. So if I share it,
Yeah.
what are they gonna do?
You more experience as you experience it, right? Because there's somebody on the other side of that coin that says, listen, my truth is that I'm responsible for making sure that all investments that we make are managed appropriately and da 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 da. And they have their own justification for why they do what they do. And that's the truth of their experience. But they don't always see the truth of your experience. They don't see how long it took you to pull all that information together. They don't see how offensive a question may be to you inside of those things, but the fact that you feel like that you have to kind of play along with it. They don't see and they don't feel the power imbalance between the two of you, right? They call you and think they're making a very neutral call, but it's never neutral, right? And so eh, to be able to speak to the truth of your experience as you experience it is a very important and powerful thing. Sometimes they don't know, sometimes they don't care. But there are people who absolutely do care and want to do something to kind of disrupt that kind of energy and that kind of imbalance, but they don't know where to start. And sometimes it starts with a little dialogue, a little humor, a little like, where do we go from here? So I think as much fear as there is about us telling our truth from the nonprofit side, at a certain moment, we have to pick our moments and then we have to go in and really tell what it is to be on this side of things. And again, if it were just about, I find this annoying, that's one thing, but it's making the work less effective ultimately, right? And who pays the price for that? It's the people we serve, it's our clients, right? They pay the price when our work is less effective. So we have a responsibility for them to say that some of this stuff is just a bunch of nonsense and that we need to focus on the main thing. And this ain't the main thing.
Thank you for everything that you do. I'm so thankful that you came to share your expertise with the small nonprofit audience. Where can people follow your work, get more information, and just I definitely want them to go to your YouTube, so I'll have that link down below, but anywhere else that you want them to go?
Yes, I would encourage people to check out our YouTube page for Memphis Music Initiative. It has all of our both satirical videos, but also some videos about the work itself. So you can see some of the young people that we work with. We're creating amazing things. You can see kind of a window into Memphis and some of the amazing work happening there. So they should definitely go to our YouTube page. And I am launching a site that will be up in mere moments for some of my speaking and coaching work. It's called ambersaysthetHings.com. So you will be able to go there and just kind of keep in touch with me and see some of the other speaking work and coaching work that I'm doing. So ambersaysthetHings.com.
Love the name.
Perfect. I'm here to say the things.
Thank you so much for being here today,
Thank you so
and
much for having me, Maria. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the work.
thank you all for listening to another episode of the Small Nonprofit Podcast. We will have those links down below in the show notes for you. I hope that you took something away from this because I think humor, the truth, leading with your experience has been super helpful when it comes to critiquing things. And I want you to have these tools because it's not always easy. You're not alone. We're all in this together. But that's it for today's episode. Until next time, bye for now.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Small Nonprofit. If you want to continue the conversation, feel free to connect with our guests directly or find me on LinkedIn. Let's keep moving money to mission and prioritizing our well-being. Bye for now.